In this lesson, we're going to be talking about sliding perspectives. So let's start back at the stance. This idea that around you, you have this field of perception, and then there's this column of you, this core you, that runs up and down your spine and anchored in your hara. This idea of a column is what we're going to be playing with as an idea here in this lesson. So if you think of that column as the ability to slide up and down, bringing your perspective where you're looking from can also then change. So if we start with the human, you can slide your perspective up and experience yourself, say, as a soul with other lifetimes or other experiences greater than just this human experience. Or you can bring yourself to multi-point consciousness. I've had this experience of being able to feel myself as Trish, as this unique point of consciousness, and also at the same time, other points of consciousness around me, and more of this feeling of a flock consciousness, or that we're all moving as one greater consciousness that has all these multi-points within it. So the idea of like those starlings, those flocks of birds that move and dance together, and yet there's all these individual points. Or we can bring ourselves up to our God self, and this experience of everything and being sort of the creator of the universe itself. Or we can go into no self, where there's just a dropping away altogether and we are just pure consciousness. So again, this is the difference, is where you're looking from. It's not just bringing your attention to it and experiencing it, it's allowing yourself to actually feel and be that level, that experience, that perspective. So we can also go in the other direction. We as humans can then feel and experience ourselves and be in the perspective of our parts. So for example, have you ever gotten triggered and suddenly we feel like that little boy or little girl? It's not just that we're looking at it going, oh, let me look at my experience as a child. This is where we become that child. We feel it, we are looking from that part of ourselves. There's also this idea that we can go and feel and be our bodies. We are experiencing the world as a body, or as our cells, or as energy. And again, I kind of see it as this circular piece where as we drop in, we can then ultimately we get down to pure consciousness, no matter which direction we go in. And it's important to note that there is a really strong connection between perspective and perception. So perception is that field around us. Well, it does automatically sort of change as we bring our attention to these different layers. When we bring our attention to the soul level, it is like the 10,000-foot view, where we're able to have a greater field of perception around us. Our experience shifts, and what we can look at also changes. This goes in either direction. When we're looking from the part of us, for example, our little boy or a little girl, our perception narrows in what we can see and what we can experience from that perspective. I also want to talk about the idea of fractals, this idea that as a point of consciousness that can slide, we can experience it or frame it as a fractal of self. So this idea of fractal is where we branch out like the branches of a tree, and we start with this one consciousness, pure consciousness. We start in connection, but then as there's this fragmenting, as there's this idea that consciousness then wants to be unique individual points of consciousness without those individuality, without those distinctions, without that differentiation, how do we have experience? We're just in being. So as this, the idea that consciousness splits into these fragments, but each fragment is in itself a whole, like that bigger diamond that then breaks into smaller diamonds. It's still a diamond, and it still has these facets and ability to navigate up and down the branches of the tree. So when we are able to slide, we can experience ourselves as any branch of this fractal. So again, another way to look at it is at each branch, we could look at it as our human self is a lifetime. As we go up and experience ourselves as soul, many of us have the experience of, oh, my consciousness is having more than one experience than just my Trishness or my Suness or what your sense of individual lifetime, this human version of you. So at that soul level, we are more than just this one human experience. And likewise, we can then go up to God's self, which then experience itself as all of the souls and all of the lifetimes ultimately. So I think of this as like fingers, where we as a body, if you think of the body as one consciousness, we then have, or one soul even, we then have the ability, we have hands and we have fingers, and each hand can be having an experience, or each finger can be having a different experience, but yet the consciousness is still one. We're still one body, we're still one sense of self. So even though our fingers might be having different experiences, we as a collective still have this one unique point of consciousness. Another way that I think about this is, rather than sort of this idea of past lives and future lives, when we are on a timeline, if we think of this timeline as a conveyor belt, we have the future in front of us and the past behind us, and we're in the present when we're on time, when we're in time. However, at the soul level, think of it as coming off the conveyor belt, and now you can see that all three of those are all on the conveyor belt at the same time. When we are out of time, when we are stepping out of the linearness of being in the human, we are able to experience ourselves as soul. All of these are happening at the same time. I was shown that time is when we're in it, is a way of allowing our consciousness to navigate and experience things sequentially. But when we're off and out of time, when we're at these higher levels of perspective, when we're looking from a higher vantage point, then time becomes much more it's all happening at the same time, and it becomes much more manipulatable, and how we experience time can actually also be changed. An important piece too is, as we are able to anchor and hold our core and be able to really have stronger expression, then it allows us actually to go higher up into ecstatic connection and down into into more humanness or the parts. It allows us to experience ourselves without losing ourselves at either end of the spectrum. This stronger sense of core allows us to navigate all these different parts and all these different aspects without losing that core sense of self.